All right. Welcome.
Welcome.
Today we're going to be talking about voice, specifically owning your voice and why we struggle with speaking our truth and what we can do about it. So voice is a big subject that we have a big definition.
It's true. Yeah. And we're going to struggle to keep it to an hour because there's lots to say about it, but we're going to do our best to be very structured in this episode. Rachel, you need to keep me in line. So let's start with the definition, shall we?
Yeah.
Of what we mean, because we kind of mean voice with a capital V, big voice. And I really can't get around the fact that I need to use the word spirituality or spiritual, because we don't just mean speaking. We mean all the ways in which you speak, with your behaviors, with your attitude, with your beliefs, and all the consequences of what you believe. Your voice is like who you are. And how you express yourself, not out of your personality, not out of your identity or your beliefs about your identity, but actually out of being a spiritual being, having a physical experience in this life. Why you're here and what you're here to say, or so the how you express yourself. There's just tremendous room for wound and shadow expression and suppression and mitigated expression, voice.
But underneath all of that, voice is connected to this core part of who you are as a person.
As a human being.
Yes.
Yeah, what you are as a human being.
Yeah.
And so it's very, very important that we all connect to our voice and we go on that journey so that we can be a voice for a higher purpose and a higher power, and we can be alive for more than just our own satisfaction or our own needs.
Yeah. Okay, so let's focus in now on voice in the context of relationships. And voice is such an important tool in relationships and such an important part of relationships.
Yes, that's where it really shows up in its wound.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. It can be a tool. It can be connecting or divisive.
Right.
Welcome to Magenta FM, a show for people who aspire to deeper, richer, and more healthy ways of being in community, in leadership, and in relationship with others. I'm Louisa Barnum.
And I'm Rachel Hazlett-Carr. Why don't we start with your story around voice?
Okay. Yeah, so Rachel and I have been talking a great deal about how we're going to approach this episode, because it's so big. And so I think it might be helpful to share my story with voice, because I have a very painful story with voice, and it really has been my struggle in this life. And so what happened with me was I started out as a violinist, did a degree, went through that whole process, was starting out on a professional career, and then injured myself. And the violin, it comes out of your neck. It's like right next to your vocal cords. So there's a sort of a voice of like that. But then I went to Europe and I started singing because I really just had to wrestle, I suppose, with this question of voice. I could not figure out how to sing, and my voice, ironically, was very fragile. Like there are some opera singers out there who have the toughest voices I've ever heard. But me, I had to try on every single problem known to singers, and I'm still struggling with my voice. Like I totally have voice nodules because I've been coughing so much because of the flu, and because I still have some bronchial stuff, and I know I have voice nodules because because I have breaks in especially my higher register, which tell me everything I need to know. That's how fragile my my voice is,
Yeah.
and how much of a struggle it's been for me.
Okay, so this is like this physical manifestation.
Yes, all the way down to physical of my struggling with my who I am, my life purpose,
right? So
and how to use my voice.
Yeah, because this physical reality is really just a mirror of what started in the soul.
Yes, exactly. So for me, with my voice, the source of my fragility in my voice has always been because, essentially you could say I was not worthy. I really struggled with feelings of unworthiness. And behind unworthiness is always shame. So shame is it's one of the most annihilating feelings out there. And so for me, my struggle has been to have a voice, to speak up, to speak my truth. And not only was I fragile in my physical voice, but I was also fragile in my soul voice because, but what I would do is I would project it, right? So I'm a woman. So if any man dared to interrupt me or they were dismissive of me, if I interpreted their behavior as dismissive of me, or if they were particularly strong personality in some way that I found triggering, then I decided that it was their fault. My projection was it was their fault. They were putting me down. They were interrupting me. They didn't respect me. They were taking away your voice. They were taking away my voice. Yes, and in a way, I would also set them up. I'm sorry, all the people that I've done this to throughout my life, but I would set them up because I would speak, but I wasn't really present. So, and this is a dynamic that my husband and I struggled with for quite some time. So, I would get started, but then I would lose track of where I was going, and then I would kind of wander off down some rabbit hole. And then my husband, who's a brilliant facilitator, would bring me back to what he'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about, or I don't understand why you're talking about that, or you've lost me. I just found that it would just trigger me so much because I'd be like, you're not listening to me. You don't care about what I'm saying. You don't know how to hear me, all of this projection, when really I just wasn't followable. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't present. Mm-hmm. So he has really helped me to understand that about, my tendencies, and that I have to stay on track. I have to stay with what I'm trying to say so that somebody can follow me, and I have to own my own fragility around this. So, but there are deeper reasons why I struggled so much, and that is because, again, I wasn't worthy to be heard. I wasn't worthy to be seen. You
believed you weren't worthy.
Yes, and that belief has really undermined so much of first of all, discovering and understanding and knowing why I'm here. And so often it'd be like, I don't know why I'm here. I may as well it was a very fatalistic sense of the world.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why I should exist. Why, what's the point?
Yeah. So you had this fragility that then manifested physically,
yes,
as well as internally, in your soul. And then you would project your fragility and blame other people for it.
Exactly.
Probably build up some resentment along the way.
Oh, so much resentment. Yes.
That everyone didn't, understand what you were trying to say, or everyone else was taking your voice away.
Exactly. Yes.
And the world is just a terrible place.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yeah. The world is ruled by indifferent gods to whom I do not matter.
Yeah.
So I didn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or the belief.
Yeah. And then look at you now. You are a teacher. You are on a YouTube show and you speak so clearly and eloquently. And I think it would come as a great surprise to a lot of people who know you or who know you through the podcast that this has been an issue for you. Because because you are so articulate.
Yeah, well, so yes, I really want to emphasize that voice has been my particular wound. Now, we're going to talk about a concept in another episode. Rachel has asked me not to talk about it in this episode, but I'm going to mention it anyway, which is your wound is also your gift. And so often, if we choose to heal our wound and go down that path, as hard as it can be, what we find is we can find that we forge a gift. Where we were weak, we become, we grow capacity.
Yeah.
And this is a sort of a meta concept that I have found to be true over and over again. And it's certainly, I think, a part of what's been my journey is that I have had such a fragility and weakness around my voice with a capital V.
Yeah.
And that has prevented me from so much, and so many dead ends, but all those dead ends were created by me because I believed that I couldn't. It's a very fatalistic sort of sense of myself and what I was capable of.
Yeah.
And now I think what I have found is that I laugh about it now because it's been such a painful journey. But now the more I speak out and the more publicly I speak out about what I really truly believe and the truth telling as a practice, so for instance, of course, 15 years of coaching, getting out, teaching groups and blah, 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 was very difficult for me. I mean, not the coaching so much because that's just one-on-one, but then also, coming into this podcast and then, the redemptive power of standing for my truth and having that as a practice. That is what has really, it's been a long journey and there have been a lot of, necessary phases along the way, and foundation building. But this is very important part of it.
Yeah. Well, I think it really points to something that is an experience for most people. I think all people I know around voice and growing your strength and your confidence and comfort in your voice, using your voice, that it's a journey.
Yes.
And that there, Rome wasn't built in a day. And
Right.
it's a strength building, building a muscle.
Yes.
And it's, there are stepping stones and there are skills and ideas and things that we teach in the school, and practices that help you along the way. But it's not a switch that you flip.
No,
Yeah.
It sure isn't. And so why don't we, go into the impediments and the experiences that we have that are that prevent us from really accessing our true voice.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about the shadow now. And in previous episodes, we've given definitions of a shadow, but let me just give a quick definition now for those of you who haven't actually, heard the previous episodes, which we highly recommend you should go do. This is a quick sort of anatomy of our inner experience, let's say. We have part of us that is shadow and a part of us that is light. And we focus on these two things when we're on a path of healing. And shadow is really like a kind of a part of us that is made up of everything that is wounded, fragile, untransformed, traumatized, habitual, compulsive, addictive, reactive. Oh, good word.
Yeah. Autopilot also
yes.
can be shadow manifest, a way that the shadow can look.
Yes. So there's a part of us that really, carries around this shadow with us everywhere we go. So yes, it is sort of dark and shadowy. Carl Jung talked about the shadow realm as really the collective unconscious. So the shadow, everything that's there lies in a subconscious part of us. Mm-hmm. We are not aware of it and we can't easily access it because it's unconscious.
Yeah.
You can't just look into unconscious realms of yourself just because you want to. So the process of healing the shadow and redeeming what's going on in there, it takes some skill and it takes some tools and methods that we teach. And then the sort of counterpart to that is if you wish to heal the shadow and all the weaknesses and the problems that are there that are keeping you stuck and small and scared and frightened, you really have to strengthen this part of you that's filled with light, filled with understanding, because that's what you use to look into the shadow.
Yeah.
Because in order to see there, you got to have light. Just to like push the metaphor as far as we can.
Okay, so let's get into shadow and some of the ways that shadow comes up when we are using our voice or needing to use our voice after a break.
Okay, awesome.
Would you like a serious solution to your people problems? One that is deep and lasting? Would you like to be able to raise the quality of interactions you have with the people in your life and work? Most people believe that the solution to ongoing people problems, such as conflict and misunderstanding, is memorizing the right thing to say or some other clever tactic. However, there are always situations where such tactics simply won't apply or succeed. Instead, you need something that can help you be present and generative in every interaction, every moment, no matter how unexpected or difficult or how high the stakes are. The truth is, you can shape the interactions you have merely through the quality of your presence. Unfortunately, an authentic and elevated quality of presence doesn't come easily or naturally any more than playing the violin does, because it's a trained and honed way of being. Like a master of Tai Chi, you can learn to work with the social spaces between you and others, not with manipulation, nor with dominance or force, but with a greater freedom, greater understanding and generosity, and a stronger presence of mind. Imagine having the kind of presence that commands respect, not because you're the alpha, but because others rise to meet you there. Imagine attracting in your life and work the kinds of high-functioning relationships that you long for. Magenta Academy for the Social Arts has developed a path to help you grow an elevated presence. Join the Elevated Presence Masterclass, where you will begin building a foundation for transforming your relationships. Enrollment opens soon, don't miss out. Go to magenta.fm/elevated presence to get on the waitlist.
Okay, welcome back. So we're talking about voice today. And we heard a little bit about your story with voice and how you struggled with that and overcame so much. It's been such a big part of your story.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to hear even more about aspects of that story in future episodes.
Yeah.
But let's look at the shadow and how the shadow shows up in obstructing or making it difficult to use our voice. And there's 3 main archetypal ways that we see the shadow interfering with voice.
Broad categories, maybe
Broad
we could.
Categories, that there's lots of variations and subtleties within each one. Uniqueness to each individual, but I think everyone will be able to relate to these at some point in their life. These 3 categories, and they're fear, doubt, and hatred.
Yes.
And we are going to get into the definitions and the specifics of each of those, because you may hear the word hatred and think, oh,
so shocking.
Not me. I don't hate anybody.
Yeah, that's right.
But let's start with fear. We all know what it's like to want to speak our voice and feel the fear that either stops us or at the very least, gives us a trembling voice as we're speaking.
Yeah, fear is kind of the easiest of the three to really identify with.
Yeah.
If you, just in the context of voice, if you have, for instance, sort of chronic underlying anxiety is nothing other than fear, right? But it's chronic. And so if you live with chronic anxiety, then chances are you are suppressing your voice. You are not able to speak your truth because of this constant fear. So you've got all these coping mechanisms to protect yourself, and one of them is going to be not speaking your truth because it's just too scary.
Too risky.
Totally understandable.
Yeah.
Too risky. Yeah. So fear, very sort of clear. Doubt is not so easily identifiable.
Yeah, because it's easy to confuse fear and doubt.
It is. It actually is. But doubt is worth the effort to try and understand and differentiate from fear because, obviously doubt arises out of fear. Like, I'm afraid of certain outcomes. I doubt myself. But let's just focus on doubt, even though I realize that it can be hard to separate out the two. But doubt is like when you second guess yourself constantly, for instance. And if you doubt yourself in any way, shape, or form, then there's a mistrust, right?
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then of course you're not going to be able to speak your truth, because what's really needed in order to speak from a place of strength and clarity is trust. You have to trust yourself in order to be able to do that. And to there's something very emancipating about speaking the truth, your truth. But in order to do that, in order to experience that emancipation, in order to be free to do that, there can't be any self-doubt.
Right.
And if there is, and you have sufficient courage that you can speak out, then great, fantastic. That's the practice.
Yeah.
For myself, I have really struggled a great deal with doubt. I'm constantly second guessing myself. I'm constantly in doubt because, this ties into my journey with the voice because of beliefs about unworthiness. And if you do have beliefs about unworthiness, you are going to experience doubt because you don't trust yourself. You don't believe in yourself. You don't feel worthy and good enough.
Yeah. You don't believe your intuition either.
That's
maybe
right.
you have an intuitive feeling about something that you think you should say, but you just don't fully trust your intuition. So you keep
disregarding it.
Yeah.
Which is so interesting because if you disregard yourself and your own voice, what you're going to find is that other people are going to mirror that. The world is going to mirror that back to you. And so, yes, I have had experiences of my voice being disregarded, and certainly that's what I've concluded about what happened. But of course that's going to happen if I disregard my own voice. The world is going to mirror that back to me. We talked about that, I think, in like the first episode. I can't remember. So, doubt. Now the third one, I realize that hatred is a shocking word, and but I stick to my guns with that word because, again, we're talking about archetypes.
Yeah.
We're talking about these broad. Well, we're actually talking about spiritual archetypes. Let's just call it that.
Yeah.
This is like the three beasts of the apocalypse: fear, doubt, and hatred. And these are the three experiences that you are going to go through, even if you don't necessarily recognize them right now, in order to grow as a human being and grow into your spiritual capacity as a human being. You are going to meet those three beasts one way or another. I believe that. And so hatred, let's just give a definition of that. That is, let's call it some other words. So disdain, or irritation, or antipathy. And it could be toward the world, or it could be toward another person, or it could be toward yourself, self-hatred. But you can see, for example, hatred playing out, if you grow up believing that the world is against you, and you cannot trust the world, and you cannot trust other people, and you can only rely on your own self, and you have to maintain a distance of disdain and antipathy toward, the world, that is a form of hatred. And also in terms of self-hatred,
Mocking self, if you have mocking,
Yeah.
mocking thoughts.
Yes. Mocking thoughts, what's the word? When you're putting yourself down, I suck.
Yeah.
I'm no good. I'm not worthy. This is all self-hatred. Obviously I'm familiar with self-hatred. And it's important that I realize it's a really strong word. But I think it's important that we own up to what we tell ourselves about ourselves. Is it positive or is it negative? Well, if it's negative and we're putting ourselves down, there's this critical voice in us.
Yeah.
That's hatred. That's self-hatred.
And then in regards to the other, we could say, oh, of course I don't hate my husband. I love my husband. But there are moments where I can speak to my husband with a tone of, disdain or irritation with what he's doing. Like, I can say, oh, I don't hate my husband, but I hate when he does that,
Yeah.
And then my communication and my voice can become colored with this, a cutting or a condescending tone. Or a colleague. It could happen, it's not exclusive to your marriage, but...
Well, bullying is, in terms of colleagues.
Yeah,
right?
True. But even colleagues who get along. So the point I'm trying to make is that, hatred is not a feeling that we have toward one person all the time.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's just, it's an expression of in a moment.
Of just our shadow, which is not who we really are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But it's an archetype and it's good if we notice.
Yes. Yeah. And the more that you practice with it, you can get better at, seeing that, that coloring of your thoughts or that coloring of your mood.
Yeah.
And bite your tongue,
Right.
and maybe you have something good to say, but there's so much emotion and hatred or irritation or whatever, nicer word that's shrouding it, that you bite your tongue until you're, calm and you can say it with love.
Right.
And when our voice can take on so many tones.
Yeah. So those are the three sort of broad generalizations of how the shadow can express itself and shut us down.
Yeah.
And prevent us from living into our true voice.
Yeah.
Which expresses our true nature in a way.
Yeah. I think we should give some more examples of how I'm sure examples are coming up for our listeners, but let's just share some more examples, different contexts, different ways that we experience doubt, fear, and hatred when we are using our voice. Yes.
Yeah. Like, what about being nice and not wanting to rock the boat?
Oh, yeah.
Now that's
gotta be a good thing, right?
That, is related to fear. Like,
Yeah.
at all costs, we have to keep the peace.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or doubt. So you walk into someone else's home and you're like, oh, am I interrupting? Am I okay? Is it okay for me to be here? I doubt, whether it's okay for me to, be in this space.
Yeah. Am I a burden?
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Am I a burden?
Yeah. The fear of speaking up to a healthcare provider, for instance. I know so many like women, for instance, who in your pregnancy and your birth and your care of your newborn baby. And I've recently had, 2 babies in the last couple of years. So there's a lot of people in my world who are, in this space or recently in this space.
Yeah.
And there's so many decisions, there's so many decisions that you need to make, and there's suggestions, or they don't, expectations from the healthcare providers. And it can be really hard to speak your voice to a healthcare provider and say, no, I'm going to decline that test, or ask for informed consent, or advocate for how you want something to go in your birth. And that's, I think, one that all women I know who have given birth have faced at some point in their pregnancy, birth, or, early childhood years of, working with healthcare authorities.
Yeah. Being your own advocate.
Yeah.
Yeah. And trusting your gut sense.
Yes.
Because you're thrown into one unknown after another, especially with your first child.
Yeah.
And you haven't done the research and you don't know, but you have a gut sense, and learning to listen to that and trust that can be, so doubt in your own sense of what's right and wrong. Yeah. So that's a really good example. And then hatred, another example of is what we're seeing happening all around the world, this intense polarization, political, ideological polarization. So, how do you feel about we live in California, so obviously most people are, democratically inclined.
Yeah.
But how do you feel about the Republicans if you're a Californian?
Yeah.
Or if you're in the South, how do you feel about the Democrats? How do you feel about our current president?
Yeah.
Or the previous president?
Yeah.
Very, very polarizing individuals, right, in the political landscape. The vitriol that is being, thrown against each of these different ideologies is astonishing.
Yeah.
Like, that is hatred. That is pure and simple hatred.
Yeah.
And let's not participate in that. Because that is the shadow unleashed.
Yes. Let's see, another that's coming up for me is passive aggression. So being that one expression of this is someone who's so suppressed or trying to suppress their true voice
or feelings,
but it just can't help but find its way out in in a facial expression or in a slightly cutting remark.
Or when it's unconscious.
Right.
Yeah. So passive aggression is so often unconscious. We lose our keys right before a very important, job interview. So we ruin our chances of getting this job that we dream of.
Yeah.
Talk about passive aggression, right?
Yeah. You have like a very broad definition of passive aggression that's I think even like bigger than most people have thought about that idea before, is this kind of sabotage.
Yes, self-sabotage. Yeah, I call that passive aggression. And also when we do it unconsciously in relationship.
Yeah.
And we do that because we are not connected to our truth, because we are not connected to our voice.
Yeah. And maybe or in other ways, it can look as just suppressing for so long. And then we finally are just like, I have to say it.
Yeah.
And at that point, it has so much charge, and it's cutting or demanding or insulting.
Yeah.
And it's not necessary.
And there's a lot of collateral damage.
There's a lot of collateral damage, yes.
Yeah.
But, the core of the message may be wholesome and
good
and true.
And thus we learn to not use our voice because we don't know how to use it in healthy ways.
Yes.
In that, in communication, for instance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sure is easy coming up with examples.
There's actually another list here. We've got being demanding and attacking and like falling apart, and we've got cutting others down and being manipulative, and gossip.
Ooh, yeah, gossip. So using your voice, but not directly.
Yes. Yes, and gossip is so corrosive. I just have to put out a little public announcement about we really have to watch gossip, because it's one of the top reasons why people leave companies and jobs, because the gossip is so destructive.
It's so toxic.
Don't talk about people behind their back. Just don't do it. And if you have something to say, use your voice, not your passive aggression. Use your voice, not your gossip voice.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. That's the end of my...
I applaud your PSA.
That's the end of my lecture, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so to summarize, our fear, doubt, and hatred, these archetypal ways that we are shut down from our voice, or we come against a challenge in using our voice, these are all expressions of the shadow. And when we are in this place of shadow, we call that being triggered. And that's part of our language. So just to reiterate, triggered for us is not always an explosive, meltdown or fight, or like, whoa, that person's really triggered. They're yelling. Like, it can look like that, but it can also look like it's any time that we're in a compulsive state, that we're not in charge, we're not acting freely, we are reactive.
Yeah, we have feelings coming up. Yeah, negative feelings.
Yeah,
and they can be really subtle, but they can cause us to pull back, to frown a little bit, to feel a little reaction coming up in us, to dissociate, to check out. All of this, from the very subtle to the rather hysterically extreme. Yeah, we call that a trigger. Yeah, and I realize it's very broad, but in our exercises and tools that we have, the trigger is very useful because it's like a little red flag to point us towards something very important about the expression of the shadow, which again is very hard to see into because it's unconscious. Yeah. And the trigger is like a map. It's a guide. It's a navigational tool. Yeah. So that's why we have such a broad definition, and that's why we use that word in particular. Yeah.
Okay, so what do we do about all of this?
What the hell do we do? How do we heal our voice?
Yes.
How do we release it from this binding nature of the shadow? Yeah. So there's it's a two-step process. As with anything to do with healing, it's of the soul nature. Two-step process. It's shadow work, and it's what we call strengthening the light. It's both of these things. And the shadow work really is about getting to know the nature of the wound. That's why we give you this tool of asking you, is it fear? Is it doubt? Or is it hatred? Because this is a part of the intelligence, or the knowledge that you need to start to find the true name of your wound. Yeah. That is binding and encircling your voice and preventing you from speaking. So
we teach a lot of tools in the school around doing that tracing work. And naming the wounds that are at the root of our shadows. Yeah.
But you can't fully do that work without having a strong enough light, because shadow is like dark. It's dark in color. You're not going to see a shadow out there that's filled with light.
Yeah. So like taking your story, for instance. Yeah. You couldn't just look at yourself and you wake up and you get out of bed in the morning and you're like, hey, I'm very fragile because I believe that the world is indifferent to my needs.
Yeah, that's right.
It took your triggers. It took your the shadow of these beliefs that were, holding you in some way, showing up, and you start to name them and see, oh, this, I noticed this pattern playing out. Is that correct?
Yes, but I wouldn't have had the strength to name it and to see it and then to do something about it just by analyzing the shadow nature of it all.
Yeah.
Like I could analyze and trace the tendencies and how it's expressing itself in my life, because how you do one thing is how you do everything. I wouldn't have had the strength to see it fully in its full expression, nor would I have had the strength to do something about it if I wasn't strengthening the light. Now, we do have a much sort of bigger definition in previous episodes, probably episode 2, the one that's about anatomy of the soul, whichever one that is. And I recommend you go back and listen to that, because we go more into this if you're confused or not clear. But so the light is really about strengthening your connection to where you can grow your trust, your self-trust, your trust in yourself, trust in the world, where you can go to strengthening your faith in the world, faith in yourself. And there's specific practices that you can do that build a foundation for what we are just calling as a word. If you have a better word, please tell us, but this is the best word we've been able to come up with for light. Another word for light is cognition. Another word for that is understanding, or maybe even you could say connection to source. And this is where we get into difficult territory, because what we're really talking about is connection to spiritual source, because healing happens through connection to the spiritual source. You cannot fully heal. In all the years of experience that I've had with my own healing path and with coaching and helping people who've been through some very, very difficult life experiences, you cannot actually fully heal from the wounding and the ways that you've internalized your life experiences without a spiritual worldview. It just can't happen. And if you know that, or if this resonates with you, then please keep listening, because we're going to talk a bit about why this is.
Yeah.
So what really is involved with strengthening the light? It's part of it is capacity building, like for instance, strengthening your voice. Strengthening your courage, strengthening your willingness to hear the truth, which is a kind of a courage. There's lots of ways that, capacity building, there's lots of different kinds of capacities that you build when you're on a healing journey. But the other part of it is connecting to source. And what is that source? It's the source that is that's constantly creating, the known world. It's also the source of what we are as human beings. And this is where it's going to get edgy for some of our listeners. And that is, I just want to propose that you live with this idea that we are actually spiritual beings having a physical experience. We are not physical beings having a physical experience. And if you just hold that idea and sit with it, what actually happens is everything changes about the nature of healing and how you understand the nature of healing. Because in my experience, the healing of my voice is coming about not by going to ear, nose, and throat doctor and analyzing my vocal cords and trying to figure out why my voice is so fragile. Because the wound is not in my voice. The wound is in my soul, which is a part of my spiritual nature. And so that is where I have to work in order to find a new relationship to my voice. I have, and it doesn't happen the other way around. So what does that look like, and what did I do, and how did I do it?
Yeah.
So first of all, you have to be open to the idea that you're a spiritual being having a physical experience. If you're not even open to that idea, I don't know how to help you. But if you are open to that idea, then there are 3 things that I have done my entire adult life, without each of which I would not have had the strength of mind to go into my shadow, understand it, and then to redeem, to be able to heal that, or we say to cook and eat my shadow.
Well, and transform
Yes.
your shadow from something that is limiting and dark to a gift and something that is generative.
Right. So what are those 3 things? They are meditation, huge. We'll talk about it in just a minute. Study, not so well known, but equally important. I'll tell you why. And prayer. Now, I'm not telling you prayer because I think you should become a Catholic. I'm not talking about religious, institutions when I talk about prayer. I am talking about realizing that what intervenes in your healing process, what actually happens to you, is redemption. And when you have a practice of laying your shit at the altar and saying, here it is, I see it, I'm admitting, I'm confessing, then a higher power can bring something that we like to call grace. And without grace, I do not know how we heal. But you have to set up the conditions in which grace can happen. What is grace? What do I mean by that? What I mean is when insight drops in, when a new understanding drops in, and my preferred word is cognition, but I get pushback on that word, and I get it. So that's why I bring in understanding. But for me, understanding is such a prosaic word. I like something with a bit more like vertical punch. So cognition for me is a spiritual power that can drop in where we go, oh, I see. I get it now. What is it that gives you that insight?
That allows you to elevate above your own experiences in your biography that may be very painful and limited and,
confusing.
maybe. Yes. Yeah. If you don't have examples of pure unconditional love, where do you find that? Where do you source that?
Yeah.
If you don't have examples of trust, of a trusting world, how do you
construct
learn
that
trust?
Yeah.
How do you heal distrust?
Yes. And that's a very good point you're bringing, because in my experience working with people who've been through complex trauma, meaning they experienced trauma as children, trust is huge. And it's been the main issue that we've worked on. And for at least a couple of, I can't actually remember, but I know for sure 2 that I've got in my mind, we worked a lot on trust. And it wasn't trust in the world, and it wasn't trust in other people, because that was taken from them by their childhood experiences. It's not like they can go back and reconstruct that.
Yeah.
But it was trust in a higher power. And it was tethering and learning how to tether to that higher power where they could experience trust, even maybe for the first time.
Yeah.
And they already had a spiritual worldview, so I was able to go there with them. And I wasn't always able to go there with people if they never had any experience with spiritual concepts. Which brings me to study. because study is incredibly important. And I don't mean any old study. I really do mean the study of spiritual texts, texts that have been given by spiritual beings to special human beings, right? For instance, the Bible, or the Bhagavad Gita, or I have my personal
teachers and mystics
and mentors, in the form of books. Some of my favorites are Meditations on the Tarot, which is supposedly written by an anonymous author, but we actually know who the author is. But anyway, Meditations on the Tarot is very, very profound work by this individual. There's also I love reading the mystics. One of my favorites is Anne Catherine Emmerich, and let's see, what's her name? Estelle. Teresa Avila of Avila. I'm reading at the moment.
Yeah, Estelle Isaacson.
Judith von Halle. She's difficult to read. She's very, she's difficult but amazing. So study, reading this. What happens when we study, Saint John of the Cross. So he and Teresa of Avila were very dear friends, and they, partnered on a lot of initiatives. Anyway, the reason why I'm saying this is because what happens when you regularly study these kinds of texts, it gets you used to the idea of a spiritual reality behind the manifest world. And it gets you used to thinking about and contemplating spiritual concepts.
Yeah.
And it stretches your narrow concept of what the world is, which is really important, especially in our time, because we live in a profoundly materialistic and reductionist worldview. It rules a lot of our lives.
Yeah.
And we have to actually learn to think much more deeply and broadly, more vertical and more horizontal outside of that. Otherwise, we're not going to really know what our true nature is.
Yeah.
Because, again, we are not physical beings having a physical experience like Darwin would like us all to believe. We are spiritual beings, and we have to get to know our true nature. And this might be a bit of a stretch, but stay with me. Just, contemplate this. If we wish to really connect to our voice, which will help us connect to our purpose in this life, we're going to have to wrestle with this idea that we are spiritual beings.
You know that Darwin actually was very worried that his theory of evolution would draw people away from God.
Well, he was right.
He was right.
Yeah.
He had a strong intuition and a fear that would happen, and indeed it did.
I don't think he really believed in his own theories toward the end, from what I understand. And so we're still trying to grow out of them ourselves,
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of challenging ideas now too around, where does cooperation and altruism come into play in nature, and survival of the fittest, as a standalone theory has a lot of holes.
Yeah, and what we're seeing is a kind of a quantum shift away from competition and survival of the fittest to cooperation. Yeah. Because that's actually what we see in nature. Yeah. Which is good. This is, let's get there, and we'll get there. So that was study. Now, in my world, meditation is really the strength training. It's where you go every day and you practice silence. And silence is really important because you have to empty out in order to be able to receive. If you're a full cup and you're full of words and you're full of conclusions, you are not open.
Yeah.
You're not receptive.
Yeah.
So you have to empty out, and you can't just flip a switch. Mm-hmm. You actually have to have a practice. And so how can we do that? Well, we meditate, we get comfortable in silence, and we silence the inner voices of doubt and fear and hatred, for instance. Good practice. And we silence the conclusions and the beliefs. We silence the critical voices. We silence it all, and we empty out. We lay all of that at the altar before the spiritual worlds, and we say, here it is. Here's all my shit. I'm seeing it. I'm struggling with it. I lay it before you, and I pray for help with redeeming this.
Yeah.
You know? And then the study, if we're doing the study in the meditation, the study has the effect of nourishing our meditation. So part of what Rachel and I teach in meditation is we don't work with breathing, and we don't just work with emptying the mind. Actually, what we do is we work with concentration, which, you know, being able to get to silence is a very concentrated state of mind. But we actually have quite a few concentration exercises. But we also work with the feeling life. Mm-hmm. And there are some foundational feelings that are very necessary if you wish to experience freedom from the compulsion of the shadow. And those three feelings are peace. It's a very big one. That's kind of like the first one. Gratitude, very important. And the third one, which is harder to talk about, but I'm just going to throw it out there, devotion. With these three feelings, or reverence. Reverence might be a better word, maybe. Let's say reverence. So reverence for life, right? Reverence for another human being. Reverence for our beautiful animals that we have in our lives. This is a very important experience that we have to practice, like experiencing in our soul. And if we can practice these things, what we do is we set up the conditions for being open to a higher power that can intervene in our lives. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean intervene as in make us wealthy and healthy and whatever the third thing is, right? Like some kind of self-involved.
Wise. Well, it might work for the third one, but maybe not the first two.
Right. Thank you. I forgot about the wise. But what happens is when we're doing meditation and we're doing study and we're doing prayer, what happens is we realize that our voice and the emancipation of our voice is actually not about us. It's not about, I'm gonna strengthen up my voice so I can be alpha. Yeah. So I can be powerful.
It's such a reversal.
Yeah. It's so that we can be a voice.
Yes.
A voice for we can elevate out of selfish, self-involved, weak fragility, for instance, the expression of our wound. And we can elevate into a place where it's not about our work, it's about the work. Mm-hmm. It's about the nourishing and healing of the world, because the world so desperately needs it. It's about my emancipation is really important, but it's important so I can help others emancipate too. Yeah. It's about being in service. Mm-hmm.
So the grace that we receive, we can then, generatively share with others also, like in a marriage, for instance, your voice becomes the voice of the marriage, of your partnership, of the needs of you both. You hold the other.
Hold both. Yeah.
And there's such a co-creative gesture in that that is life-giving and productive and loving. Mm-hmm. And it's not that's not exclusive to a marriage. It's in our teams. It's in our communities. Mm-hmm. It's in speaking your voice at your child's school, for instance. You know, it's not about asserting yourself. It's about holding the school.
And all the children.
Yes.
Not just your own.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And this is what the world needs.
This is leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, it's so much more than just you and your voice. The emancipation of your voice is medicine for so much more than just yourself.
Yeah.
So that's why it's so important that you connect to your voice.
Yeah.
Because you're connecting to your purpose.
And it gives you the ability to hold the voice of others.
Yes.
Because if we're suppressed or small or self-centered or emoting, we don't have the capacity in that space to listen to a diversity of ideas and perspectives. Or sit in a room and hold 12 different perspectives and allow a cohesive truth to emerge within these ideas.
That's true. And that reminds me, so in episode 5, I think I or you or one of us mentioned implicit bias and the controversy of implicit bias training. And this, we're really touching on why it is so controversial and it's not always very successful. It is such an important topic, right? Racism in the workplace or sexism. But the truth is, we are not. If we don't do the strength building in this way, we don't actually have the capacity to hold diversity.
Yeah.
We're not taught to hold diversity through our education systems and education paths. We are taught to be polarized. It's right or it's wrong.
Yeah.
You know, that's education in a nutshell. So this is incredibly important that we, the more our own voice is emancipated, the more capable we become of holding a diverse range of ideas, a whole gray area.
Yeah.
So this is really important. And this, your emancipation of your voice is going to help us all to end the polarizing that we're experiencing in the world today.
Yeah. Okay. Well, on that note, let's just summarize what we covered today. So we jumped off with this definition that we tried to encompass the spiritual profundity of the voice, and that it's so much more than just our communication. And then we focused on, the context of voice in relationships. And Louisa told her story of your struggle with your voice, through your life, and how that started to manifest in relationships as, projecting your own issues with your voice onto others and believing that other people were taking away your voice
Yes.
or didn't care about your voice.
Yeah.
And then the resentment built up. But ultimately the redemption that you had, and now you're such a big part of your life and your gift to the world is
My
your voice.
Right. But not in the way I ever thought.
Yes, not in a singing way.
No,
but in a speaking way.
Yes.
Even more profound, in my opinion. So then we went into the ways in which our voice gets shut down, and we focused on the 3 archetypal aspects of the shadow that inhibit our voice, which were fear, doubt, and hatred or self-hatred. And we gave a slightly broader definition of the word hatred. And we had lots of stories.
Yeah.
To
hopefully you're clear. Hopefully it's enough.
Yeah. And you can share your own story with us too. Of
Yeah, we'd
how
like to hear
fear, doubt, or hatred or self-hatred has impeded your voice or made voice a struggle for you.
Yeah.
And then we shifted to, the question of, well, how do we heal? Everyone wants to have confidence in their voice, I believe. That's part of our voice is part of our birthright.
Yeah. As a human being.
Yes. So we went into the 2 steps of healing, which is the shadow work, and the work of strengthening the light, and talked about the connection to source, and the different ways, the different practices of connecting to source, and how those practices and how that connection to source heals in a way that doing the shadow work and the naming of the wound work alone doesn't heal. I think a lot of us know people who have been in therapy their whole lives, naming their traumas and
going back into it
and working so hard and are just still stuck in those wounds and haven't, found freedom or found the redemption or the transformation out of that.
Yeah, that's right.
And then we articulated some of the outcome of that healing work in relation to your voice, and how there is an aspect of service. There's not only a freedom of the shadow, but also sort of a deeper perspective of the world and humanity and our purpose and our role in it. Yeah. And with that comes grace and compassion and service and love.
Yeah,
yes,
that's right.
And co-creativity and holding a diversity of opinions. And it's so interesting how the work on our own voice strengthens our ability to listen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, as always, we would love to hear from you, listeners.
And we have been hearing from some people. So I think next time we should share some of the comments that people are making.
Yeah,
so we'll do that. Yeah, we'll do that next time.
Okay. And comment, like, and subscribe. You can also reach us by email at hello@magenta.fm. Learn more about the school at magenta.fm is the website. And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. And we'll see you next time.
All right.